Welcome, everyone, to another session of Kraken Trading Spaces. This time, we're focused on one of the most valuable edges in trading, knowing how to spot outperformance early on. As always, I'm here with Den Toshi. How you doing, Den?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. I'm doing great. How are you?
Living the dream. As always, great to be here with you, of course. Listen, before we get started, just a quick disclaimer that, of course, nothing shared here is financial advice. It's for informational and educational purposes only. All right, disclaimers out of the way. Let's uh, let's get stuck in. There's been quite a bit happening over the past week or so, in particular, the past 24 hours, and we've seen a bit of chop in the market. We had the Fed rate decision, or lack of decision, happen. Yesterday, we've had some big tech earnings. We've got MicroStrategy or Strategies earning calls coming out later on today. What's your thoughts, Dan, on the state of the market right now?
Yeah, let me start with sharing my screen just to give you guys a bit of visual ideas. Let me know if you can see that.
Yeah, we got you.
Awesome. Yeah, like you said, it has been a choppy week for sure. I mean, I think there is a lot going on. Like you said, there was FOMC, a lot of earnings, and then we have some tariff stuff as well. I believe decisions are being made throughout the week, but if I recall correctly, also something tomorrow, but
hmm
um,
I think that's the
no.
deadline for the
Yeah,
the,
it's
the
a,
final tariff decisions. Yeah.
exactly. As it comes to the market, I think that of course we had really big moves. If you look at Ethereum, for instance, here we can see that we just had like it was basically up only for a really long time. So it is very logical that we do get some sort of cool off. And I think that these cool offs can happen in two ways. It's either price based, which means a big dump, or it's time based, which means chop, which is basically what we are seeing now. Of course, we have been seeing a little bit of price-based capitulation here, but not too much. I think that's more so on some of the altcoins. But I think now it's just going to be really interesting how we move from here. And I do think we are at some key areas also for BTC. You can see with this chart here, we are kind of like, yeah, in the middle of holding this support and are for our EMAs, for instance, but then also we're not breaking out. So we're holding support, but we're not breaking resistance, which kind of, like you said, indicates that we are in that chop area. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people, they like to think of outperformance as something that is the main point of focus when a market is really hot, which is definitely true. But I would also say that you want to start spotting this very early on because when the chop ends, the coins that move the earliest or move the best are usually the ones that are also going to sustain that momentum throughout the next rally if we will have one, of course. So this is really like preparation that you want to be doing now, I would say.
Absolutely. And I think um, a lot of the stuff that we covered last week and even the prior week when we did it via Spaces shed a bunch of really useful prep work that can be done and planning work. So if anyone listening hasn't been through the previous couple of episodes, you should definitely start with some of those after you listen into this one. And to your point here, Dan, of talking about outperformance, what we're going to be really focused on right now. It's a fast moving market. Yeah, we're seeing some chop, but what everyone wants to know is, how do we pick winners? And what actually makes an outperformer, so to speak. So why don't we dig one layer deeper into this? What are the kind of traits, patterns that you expect to see from a coin that would then go on to outperform the rest of the market?
Mm. I mean, I think it's really important to acknowledge that like an outperformer is of course something that is in relation to the rest of the market, right? Because it's like better than the rest to say so.
Mm.
So obviously it has to have something that makes it special compared to the other coins that are also, coins to choose from. And I think like, if we are really being real, we are all here for like the green candles. So if you would look at it like very simple, an outperformer is a coin that does better than the rest. The reasons for that can be a very wide variety of things. It can be like a narrative, it can be like fundamentals, it can be a really beautiful chart. But I also personally think that it's very timing based, which is something that maybe not enough people talk about. Whereas like sometimes you have a coin that is a very good buy, but it just has been down only for whatever reason that is, whether that is the state of the rest of the market or maybe some FUD that was either true or not, or it has been like unlocks or something like that. And then at some point we find ourselves in a time where the charts and the value of the coin maybe are not in line with each other, which is
Mm.
something that we saw, for instance, on Athena, I think, which is, in my opinion, a very nice, fundamentally sound coin. But then, of course, there were a ton of unlocks, and there was a general market that was just not so great. And then at the same time that like the market started moving, they of course announced, I think was a 360 mil fund or something, of which minimum of
Yeah, it's a
250 mil was for
treasury
buybacks.
vehicle, isn't it? That they're launching, and there's going to be like these structured buybacks where
Yeah,
I can't
yeah,
remember all
yeah.
the details, but like yeah, they're going to be buying a ton of market buys for locked tokens. So it's getting quite a substantial amount of price support.
Exactly. So at that point, I'm not sure like when that was announced or when the unlocks that were holding price down stopped, but the true case here was that like we do have a coin that's fundamentally sound. It is moving in a range. The market is shit, and then at some point we start moving out. We get a lot of good news, and from there, this was one of the strongest charts of the past week. And I think like these are all clues that we can use where we can kind of like match the chart with the value, with the fundamentals and the timing to kind of see like, okay, this is maybe a really good asset to long.
And it sounds like from what you're saying here, Dan, the chart doesn't tell you the whole story, right? And there's
Mm.
more research. You know, we were talking a little bit about some of the macro that impacts the whole market, but then you're also talking about things like unlock schedules, other major catalysts and news that just simply looking at the chart, you might not be able to have all the context on, right?
Yeah, of course. And sometimes it's tough also because obviously, as a retail trader, you're not always going to have all of the information. Sometimes there are insiders that are buying things earlier than you are because they have that information of, for instance, news that's going to come out or whatsoever. But I do think even in those situations, sometimes on the chart, as a retail trader, you can already spot that it's kind of moving different than other assets. Which is also, I think that is something that's very closely tied with outperformance is kind of like early movers or leaders, as we like to call them. And there are actually a lot of good examples of those kind of charts. I really like show what kind of strength can come from being the first mover.
Absolutely. You mentioned fundamentals in some of this, and I feel like that is a term that is used a lot in crypto when describing projects and
Mm.
assets and their potential value. From your perspective, can an asset still go on to outperform the market if it doesn't have some of these fundamentals that you're talking about? You know, more the like a really strong development roadmap, a load of activity on chain, all of these signals that maybe you find out from outside of the chart.
I mean, of course, I think we saw like a crazy meme coin run, right? Very recently, which is obviously
Very,
not
very strong fundamentals there in those groups.
exactly. I mean, listen, I think like in this attention economy, attention is one of the biggest currencies. So in that sense, you could say that like that might be a fundamental on itself as well, right? Like the fact that
Yeah,
out of all the coins these days, and we all know that this cycle has been the cycle with the most dilution ever because there's so many coins created because it is so easy to create coins these days. So I think like if you are able to catch that attention, if you are able to build that community while the people that are buying your asset have so many other options, I mean, yeah, you could say that that's a fundamental by itself. So I definitely think that these things um, can move. And sometimes you will also see that, there are, for instance, a lot of big buyers on chain. People are like tracking their wallets, and then it kind of becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because people start buying because other people are buying, and then the chart starts looking good, and then people keep buying. So to
it's
answer your
kind of
question, yes.
price leads narrative, narrative leads price kind of situation. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
for
you could
sure.
even make the argument based on what you were saying there that, meme coins as an asset class within crypto, if we think about the fundamentals powering meme coins, which, yeah, like you say, is the ability to garner attention, is probably more influential in those kind of
Mm.
assets than the kind of typical fundamentals that we talk about for, let's say, layer ones, layer twos, like these kind of assets.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say like there's a time and place for everything, right? Because I'm not sure exactly when the meme coin mania started this time around, but I think like for instance now, just the way that like um the whole Trump administration is moving and just more like legal stuff that gets approved for crypto left and right. I think at some point it was logical that there was like a shift towards utility, but there's a time and place for everything. I think back in what was the year 2023 when we had a really big GambleFi moment. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah, I
That
remember
was
it
also
very
because
well.
the whole market was shit, so people just went like gambling on chain because they were trying to gamble.
This is when we were, I can't even remember what it was called, but we were basically gambling on hamsters racing each other, I think, at one period
Oh
of
yeah,
time.
I
Yeah,
forgot
it's
about that.
great time. Great time.
Exactly. But yeah, so I think there's a time and place for everything. And when it comes to outperformance, like obviously, ideally, you want to be kind of like ahead of the curve with starting to think about these narratives that might come into play in a certain point in time. And obviously, we're not fortune tellers, right? So we cannot always accurately predict this. What I do think we can do is try to be early by paying attention to whatever is hot in the market and then kind of looking in one of these sectors. So for instance, I will show you guys in some on screen share anyway. Here we have on Kraken the category indices heat map where you can have like these categories like stablecoin, layer one, meme coins and stuff. So if there is a narrative that is hot, what you can do is go inside that narrative and kind of see like what is the coin that's the hottest inside this narrative, because that will probably be the leader of the narrative at that point in time. And that's obviously if you want to bet on outperformance, you want to be betting on the strongest one of the bunch.
Absolutely. And let's talk about spotting some of this early strength. You talked about entry points as well, and I'm sure we've got plenty of examples, even from previous cycles, where we've had some of these big early breakouts. What
Mm.
drilling into the entry side of things? What signals are you using here to suggest that coin's about to go on an early run?
So I think that the best example here would be Sui from summer 2024.
Oh yeah.
I wrote up a long tweet about this. If someone wants to read it, then maybe you should check Twitter because it's a little long to read for you guys. It's more of a bedtime story length. But what basically was the case here, as you guys probably all remember, summer 2024 was horrendous, boring, job down. It was the vibes were so bad. And then suddenly, yeah, it was bad. And then suddenly we started seeing some action on some very specific coins. And Sui was the one that, I mean, I'm sure there were a few, but to me, Sui was the one that stood out and started moving the earliest. And that is why it really caught my attention there. And I will show you guys the big chart there as well. So basically, this was the whole summer situation that we had, which was, like I said, spring, summer, just really down only. And we had here, of course, this little range low, really big level, as you can see here with the supports, turns, resistance, and so forth. And then we started seeing like some attempts to reclaim this, which was in this case like very unusual because a lot of other coins were not able to even move anywhere close near their 1-day EMAs, which is what these two lines are for anyone that doesn't know. And the second that this really started making these attempts, I started like scaling in there because in my head I was like, okay, you know, we have seen like down only for almost 2 quarters at this point. If there is one coin that's going to suddenly attempt a breakout, then that's the one I want to be paying attention to. And to answer your questions, some things that I look out for there are obviously always first price action, support resistance. And as I said, this was a really big level that we were trying to reclaim. But then also our EMAs that we were kind of bumping in towards and then eventually reclaimed. And so we did go on a monster run after that. And I think it was also one of the biggest movers at that time. And that's a really
It's
good
an amazing
illustration.
chart to view, isn't it?
So good. Yeah, so good. And I think like this happens often. I think there's always a few coins that are just simply looking better than the others that have reclaimed support or resistance levels earlier than the others, that have better EMAs than the others. And those are the ones that you want to be paying attention to. And that's also why I mentioned at the start of the space is that right now with all this chop that we're seeing on BTC and ETH is the moment that you want to be marking out those coins for now that are like looking slightly better than the rest.
Definitely. And is there anything that you've been kind of paying closer attention to? I know you were looking a little, we were showing some of ETH here. I know we were also chatting a little bit around kind of Pengu in the last few weeks as well has been a good example of like outperforming. Probably not a lot of people expecting that as well. Anything else that's worth kind of showing on that front?
I mean, Bengal it's good that you mentioned that one because I think that was a very strong one as well, where, you know, we saw a lot of coins with the same structure, mega dump, rounded bottom, and then sort of, I think they called us like a cup and handle situation, where we had like a very strong breakouts. And this really just was one of those charts where they all look kind of the same, but this one was just, yeah, pretty clearly leading the bunch. And as you can see, it was an incredible buy. Like even if you didn't buy the bottom, you know, you could still be up like 4x from the breakout, which is beautiful. So that's definitely one. Of course, I mentioned Athena as well, where I discussed that value versus price gap, right? Where you know that something is fundamentally sound, but the price is just looking shit. I think Pengu was actually the same because
Yeah.
I don't know if you keep up to date with their developments, but they are actually like a real company doing real
Yeah.
things with real people. So the fact that this looked like that, yeah, it was I think a pretty crazy opportunity to be honest.
Yeah, I think like, Penguin generally, Pudgy Penguins have been one of those businesses within crypto that have continuously went through people loving to hate them and pretty much proving them wrong each time, whether it be on the NFT rally or whether it be on their token. But yeah, a lot to dig into. What I want to ask you a bit of a question here as well of like when we're talking about entering in, you mentioned here some of the EMA crossovers that you're looking for. Is it better to try and anticipate this happening and then taking your entry point, or are you waiting more for like full confirmation that, you know, this this kind of like levels reclaimed and you're gonna go and make an entry point there? How do you think about the balance of those two?
Mm, that's a really good question. I think like a lot of people think that it's very black and white, which it actually doesn't have to be at all. Like no one is forcing you to full clip your position. It's not, it doesn't always have to be like a market buy Habibi. It can be limit orders for part of it and market orders for the rest of it. It can be like a mix and match,
So you're
which is
telling me that
also,
I shouldn't have been YOLOing my entire stack into any slight movement in the markets that I've anticipated?
I don't know, Matt, were you profitable? I think
Well,
that's the question.
let's come back to that.
Okay, cool. No, but if anyone wants to read this from 2024, again, the Sui tweet, it's actually exactly what I was talking about there. There is a moment with a chart where there is an early moment versus a certain moment. And I think like whoever you want to be as a trader, like really depends on how you are as a person, right? Like, and also how you are time-wise, what your capital is looking like. If you don't have a lot of money and you're working like a full-time job and you can be behind the screens, it's a very different picture than when you are like very wealthy and behind the screens all day, right? Because sometimes being early is nice because you have a better entry, but it can also mean that there's opportunity costs involved because you cannot spend the money elsewhere at that time. So
Yeah.
I think personally, I like a mix of the two. Um, because you don't always have the full clip, like I said, and I will show you guys the pump chart as well, which is something that, and I'll show it here on TradingView because I have the full history. This is something that I tweeted and I entered here. I tweeted at 24, but just 1/3 of the position because I was like, this has not confirmed to me at all because I didn't enter here. This would be a confirmation entry of 24, but I entered here. And it was like, I'm not gonna full clip this if it hasn't even showed that it can break a downtrend, because in the end, as you guys know, I am a trend trader.
Yeah.
But I do think that at this point, like the hate on my timeline was so bizarre. So I was like, I am gonna long this thing. And if I get burned, then it at least will not be for my full position. And the rest
I
I
think
will add. Yes.
yeah, this chart and pump in general, I think is going to continue to be a really interesting chart in general, like because there's it's such a divisive
I'm
um
scared. I'm not gonna lie.
it's-
It's nerve-wracking because not because of the trade, but just the whole situation, like with legal and all of that stuff. They haven't tweeted in 8 days, so who knows what's
Yep.
gonna happen.
Well,
But
you've
I
got
think,
like very strong bear case, right, for this with stuff like that. The legal piece, there's like,
of
oh,
course,
Bonk is now overtaking them in share. And then I hear like the
mm,
bull case and it's like these guys have 2 billion in cash and the token's like hovering just above 2 billion in FDV. Like do the math. So
of
it's
course, but
hard.
also ego.
Yeah.
I bet on founders with ego.
Yep.
I just think they're too proud to let us go to shit. But the point that I was trying to make with this, regardless, forget that it's a pump. It's just a trade. We can exit, we can sell, we can buy, whatever. But the point that I was trying to make is that you don't have to full clip your position in one go. You can decide, like I said here, you can be partly early and partly certain. You can like kind of mix and match, and that's the beautiful thing about trading. And I think that will also really give you some insights about your own entries because, like we discussed last week, we talked a little bit about psychology, trading hygiene, and how to prep for the week, but also about journaling. If you are journaling about your entries and you see that your early entries are like 80% of the time spot on, then maybe, you are good at having early entries. But there also are people that are like underwater for 2 weeks most of the times whenever they buy something, then maybe it's just like not your strength and you are better at buying with a support or resistance flip in that case.
Well,
Um,
on that note, then, you know, you make the entry point, whether you're early, whether you're a little bit more certain of the trend. How are you thinking coming into this? And I feel like this is a common question that we often dig into a little bit, but like when to kind of hold, when to rotate out of a position. How do you think about that, especially in these kind of market conditions?
mm, yeah, that's a good question. I would say that, I mean, obviously, I love my EMAs. EMAs are very strong to see, a very strong tool to see whenever momentum is lost. As you can see with ETH here, we had our trends, our low time frame trends perfectly holding. And this was kind of the moment where we started chopping. And since then, it's been, yeah, more than a week basically that we haven't, I mean, we moved a little, but just not very significantly. So that would definitely be number one for me. Also, overextension is another very, very nice tool that I will also show you here with an indicator that I have for my friends, which shows you whenever an asset is overextended, and you can see very nicely in the past that it performs well. Whenever it touches with clouds, it can show you that it's overextended.
Can you just
I would not
explain, Dan, what you mean by overextended?
I mean, overextended is that it has pumped a lot and maybe doesn't have the fuel to go further. So in that case, like we discussed at the start of the stream, we might be in for either a price-based capitulation, which just means like a dip in price, or a time-based capitulation, which means just kind of like us chopping around and regaining the fuel for a next leg up.
Mm.
So those are two really nice ones that I like to use to see whether it's time to rotate to something else. Fib extensions would be good if you're in price discovery. But also kind of, I guess, when it comes to narrative trading, like a narrative becoming too hot. Like, the infamous saying that whenever your taxi driver starts talking about meme coins, it's maybe time to bounce, stuff like that. And lastly, I think the first movers or leaders of the move, if they start to show weakness, that's usually also not a very good sign. So that's something I would take into account. Like the strongest of the meme coins that has been up only all the time during the meme coin mania, and suddenly it stops doing that. Like that does tell you something.
That's great advice. Yeah, I think this is something that, um, like what I've taken from some of the sessions that we've done before this, I think having a plan going into all of this is pretty key. And
Mm.
it's especially what you were talking about in the last session, so that you can have a plan for some of these different situations. I guess in all of the situations where you're thinking about the balance of letting these winners run without overstaying your welcome, so to speak. How what are you thinking about there, where you can try to get kind of the best of both worlds, or strike just the right balance? I know you talked about like the obvious signs of when to like rotate out, but also some of those signs of when you're going to hold. But what about like how we're thinking about even just carving out and taking profit at times here?
I mean, it's incredibly tough, right? Because there's so much that comes into play with it. For instance, now, we had very overextended charts on a lot of assets, and then we also had like the macro stuff, which doesn't necessarily have to be bad, right? And in the end, it's more about the reaction from the markets to whatever news there is. But it does sometimes lead to us having a slowdown or having chop. So it can be hard to really tell you like very concrete like what it is when you should sell, because there's so many things that come into play. It's the news, it's the macro economy, it's the chart itself, it's whether the narrative is hot or not, where we are in the cycle. But I think it's just good for yourself to always mark out those levels beforehand where you want to take that profit. And then if you want to let winners run, then I would personally, besides, like I said, using all of that context and also your intuition, which will build up the longer you trade. Also just really looking for signs of weakness. And for that, I like to use EMAs the most. So I think that will be my answer, even though, as a trader, like this is something that we're always trying to perfect. And there is no perfect answer, because if there was, like, we would all be selling the top, right? All the time. So it's always, yeah, it's difficult because also the cycles change, right? Like we discussed last time, the rotations are different this time around. So you're going to have to keep paying attention. And what my advice would be, I think the best advice is to keep your feedback loop very short and very sharp, where you learn from your last trades and kind of review them, because in the end, everybody has different performance, and you have to see like what worked for you in the past and what you can do better, and make sure that you take that with you to your next performance. And I think that that's the easiest way to perfect it. And then besides that, just keeping a very, very good eye on the macro side of things and the timing of the cycle as well.
Love it. I love the advice. Why don't we, I know we're coming up to time here. How can we recap kind of the high level checklist here in terms of some of the main takeaways that you want everyone to look into as they probably rewatch this several times after?
I would be honored if you guys rewatch this. Recapping. I mean, I think the most important thing is realizing that an outperformer is something that's special in relationship to the rest, whether that's just its charts, its volume, its narrative, its timing, the fundamentals. You just have to look for things that stand out and that move different and move earlier. That would be like my biggest advice. Then you want to keep an eye on the narratives that are in play in the market and which ones are hot. And from the ones that are hot, you want to pick the best and fastest moving coin, and also the cleanest moving coin. Because sometimes we can see, for instance, with stuff like CFX, which pumped like 50% in one day, two times, I think, the past week, but it just doesn't look very organic.
Mm,
So I would keep those ones out. So you want to, look at the ones that move clean, that move quick, and move the most beautiful. Yeah, you also want to watch the value gap between price and fundamentals. And then lastly, you want to rotate when the trends are lost, there's overextension, and the narratives are becoming a little bit too hot.
great advice as always, Dan. I love it. I think this was a great session. We're gonna wrap things up here. I want to thank everyone that's joined us live. If you haven't already, I would highly recommend that you watch last week's live stream that we did. That will really bring together some of the advice, some of the walkthroughs that Dan walked through today. We also did a very early Spaces as well a few weeks ago that is well worth checking out. We'll share that all out on the Kraken FX X handle. Make sure you follow at Dentoshi, follow at Kraken Pro, Kraken FX, and we'll be announcing very soon when the next of this Trading Spaces series will be coming on. And very looking forward to seeing you then, Dan.
Yeah, same. And if you guys have any suggestions for good topics that you would love to hear about from us, yeah, just tag me. I would love to read what you are interested in. And thanks for listening.
Love it. Thanks so much, Dan. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.